Chapter 8, June 14th, 2033, Seattle, Washington, USA, 70th floor, Illini Building, negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit, 05:48 hours. My eyes snapped open. Memories ached at the back of my mind. I hadn't thought about Tommy and Nathaniel in years. Even stranger, I couldn't really remember that day. I remembered my mom talking about the fracture, but it was always a quiet thing. I lay on my back in my sleeping bag. I could feel Linda's back pressed against one side of me, and Jessie was about a foot away on my other side. I extracted my arm from my sleeping bag and checked my watch. It was a smartwatch, which meant it had a billion other functions I didn't need at the time. Unsurprisingly, most of them didn't work. The network was completely gone. I lay in silence for a while. Just about everything mankind had made in the last 70 years was disappearing by the hour. No internet, no cell phone, no television, no radio, no power save in select spots. Thoughts raced through my head as I let my arm fall back to the sleeping bag. Life as we had known it had ended. These were the actual end times. Apocalypse. I shook my head. I was lying in a shelter in a government-sanctioned building 70 floors above the street, surrounded by what were likely to be the last surviving people in the city, and I was hearing voices. That did not bode well. My reverie was broken by people suddenly stirring.
"Mom, I need to go to the bathroom,"
said a small voice from the other side of the room. The acoustics were not exactly desirable, since everything was practically amplified by the hard surfaces. A few groans were loosed as others realized they desperately needed to use the facilities as well. I struggled up, causing both Jessie and Linda to snuffle in their sleep. Normally, Jessie was up before me, but the past day must have been more draining for her than myself. I stood carefully, making sure not to disturb either woman. A small pile of my warmest winter clothes lay beyond where my head had been, and I stooped and scooped. I had always been a warm person, but the cold outside was deadly. I couldn't run around in business casual. I saw other people quietly standing and making their way toward me. I was very near the doors to the airlock. Thankfully, they didn't open immediately. The night before, Jessie had shown me how to enable and disable the doors manually to prevent accidentally leaking warm air into the office. I walked over, opened the relevant panel, and tripped the switch. The doors hissed open, and the air beyond was surprisingly warm. It was maybe 20 degrees cooler than what it was inside the server room, which only put it a few degrees above freezing. Still, based on the fact that ice had grown on the inside of the glass, I thought it was fatally cold beyond the outside doors. I stepped into the airlock and looked back. The few that had wandered over toward me had hesitation written on their faces. Larry was among them, and he looked angry, or determined, or constipated. Hard to tell, actually. He wasn't especially emotive. Larry crouched a bit and stepped into the airlock. It still shocked me how tall he was, despite having been one of the first employees to Jessie's company. He turned back and waved the others in. Scary dude or not, he was somehow able to convince the others to join us. They donned their jackets, mittens, and beanies. I didn't have the accessories, but I figured it would be okay. We walked the 2 feet or so to register on the outside door sensors. It clicked, hummed, and went silent. Nothing changed. I tried again with the same result. So I turned and checked the panel set in the side of the airlock. It had a flashing red message, "Doors blocked." I scratched my head when Larry lumbered over. He set the airlock to manual and turned back to the outside doors. He had to be uncomfortable since the ceilings were only 7 feet inside the airlock, instead of 10 feet like the room beyond. We both went back to the outside door and tried to get a handhold. My hands kept slipping on the ice, and his hands were too massive to grasp anything as small as the door. I turned around and mule-kicked the door seam. Ice splintered with a loud sound. I tried again, and we heard something grind and hum. I looked to Larry, and he nodded. One more kick, and the door shuddered and moved a 1/4 inch. It was all we needed. I dug my fingers into one side of the gap with Larry on the other. We grunted and strained. Strange crackling and popping sounds emanated from the entire frame. The metal began to creak, then something emitted a crack and pop. The doors crunched, then grudgingly slid free, and air poured in from beyond. Frigid could not even begin to describe the air that touched my exposed skin. The air hit me like a physical force, attempting to sap the life from me. It had been 100 degrees yesterday. Now it was 20 below. It was the most extreme temperature differential I had ever heard of occurring naturally. The storms were raging outside, evident even through the ice and debris caked on the windows. There were still patches with a clear view to the world beyond. My breath fogged and my nose immediately began to hurt. We moved as a group through the quiet and dark room. Very little light came from the server room, and the main office was dark besides. I made a mental note to find flashlights. We continued across the length of the office, along the windows, until we encountered the women's bathroom. Half our group broke off and entered. The rest of us continued on, turning left and heading to the northern end of the building. A moment later, we found the door for the men's room, though light was extremely scarce at this point. I was thankful my eyes were so pale because I could see far better than anybody else left in the party. Larry and I were escorting 2 boys and 1 other man that had woken with us. I pushed the door open and a light clicked on with searing brightness. Apparently, the light sensor was much more sensitive in the men's room than the women's. Then again, there was little power available anywhere at this point. I was curious as to why the lights even worked. Then I stepped into the room and it was like being hit with a wet towel across the face. The room was a balmy 60 degrees with decently high humidity. I didn't even realize the air had been drying out due to the cold until I walked into the bathroom and my nose started to burn. I shook my head and the others filed around me. They had similar reactions to the intense air change. I wanted to brush my teeth to get rid of the gritty feeling in my mouth, but had nothing. I made another mental note about things needed from the store far below. I headed to a stall and took my time with the morning business. I didn't have Bledder or any other aggregate site to browse, but I had a few games left on my phone. Signal was gone and I figured that would drain battery faster. I had 60% left on my phone, though I was sure it would never be useful again. Sometime later, I left the stall and found a small group of people waiting impatiently in the front area of the bathroom. Time limits would have to be involved since we all had to share the limited resource. More and more notes for the mental ledgers. I noticed small drains in the floor. The floor was also angled to lead directly to the nearest drain. The warmth still present in the bathroom puzzled me for a moment. I looked around and found a few different grates set into the wall. Some were high and others low. I hadn't bothered looking at the restroom in depth since it was remodeled. The registers had heated air pumping in, keeping the bathroom warm. Further examination allowed me to spot a tankless water heater under the sinks. It was obviously what was providing the hot water. I was amazed the water made it this far up without freezing, but Jesse had mentioned the trunk line was insulated. I stepped up to one of the 8 sinks and hurriedly washed my hands, then rinsed my mouth and washed my face. Once I finished, I walked out of the restroom. How quickly I had forgotten reality. I had my breath stolen from my chest as I walked from the warmth of the bathroom to the deadly cold of the office. It stabbed like tiny daggers into my face, nose, lungs, and eyes. Anything exposed instantly broke out in goosebumps, my flesh drawing tight in the hostile cold. Larry was already out, looking around at the office. Only a few panels were hung toward the west side of the office. As such, sight was blocked, but nothing was done for warmth. I made a quick executive decision since I was endlessly making unnecessary plans in my head. "Hey Larry, let's get the first 10 feet or so closed off. That way we have a steady transfer path between Jesse's office and the server room, and we have somewhere to heat up food. The break room will be great for spreading us out. If we have double walls, this might actually become bearable." He nodded, and we both walked toward the pile of materials that had been discarded the night before. I immediately determined that Larry would be far more useful than myself in hanging the sheeting. He was so tall he could actually move the ceiling tiles if desired. He could hang a strip from the ceiling, secure it in place, staple it to the floor, then start the gap layer an inch or so behind the first. He was an absolute machine, installing walls as I struggled to keep supplies ready for him. After only 45 minutes, we had a double layer of walls set to keep a limited area warm. We now had about 10 feet of contained space to walk around in. It took some time, but with an airlock built into the walls made for overlapping plastic flaps, people stopped complaining as they exited the server room. One quick consultation later, and Jesse approved opening both server room airlock doors to ensure something like regular airflow through the opened area. We wanted to be careful since we had no way of providing fresh air ourselves. I realized the bathrooms would be an issue since they were far across the main office. Larry finally spoke up.
Dante had a great idea. If we continue extending the walls all the way to the bathrooms and put an airlock in front of the lobby door, we can contain our warm air. There are enough of us to make this happen. I think we'll need triple walls to ensure actual warmth, but the cubicles will stop being ice cubicles.
He paused for a moment. I was too stunned to laugh. That was literally the first time I had heard Larry make a joke. I stared in slack-jawed amazement. He shrugged and set about gathering more materials. I shook my head and started hauling stuff through the plastic airlock into the office proper. The cubicles caused a bit of trouble since they were often in the way. We left them alone since both Larry and I were far more focused on finishing the expansion as soon as possible. When we were about 20 feet shy of completing the south side, a call came through the plastic.
"Come get your lunch!"
shouted Jesse. Larry and I met eyes. My stomach rumbled as if to punctuate our silent agreement. We eased down the supplies and headed back through the temporary airlock. A quick glance at my watch showed that it was already 11 a.m. based on the old clock. It was still just as dark outside as it had been throughout the night. Without the sun, the moon never shone anymore. I sat down, weary from the work Larry and I had been doing. It was tough, even if the materials themselves weren't particularly heavy. Linda sat next to me, shoulder to shoulder. I saw Jessie looking over more than once, but she seemed to hold her tongue. It was strange to see. I chatted with Linda and Eddie as we ate our MREs. They were far from gourmet, but it was nutrients and it would make a turd, as one of my old friends had a habit of saying. That friend had likely already died as well. Little thoughts like that constantly popped in, trying to fuck me up. I discovered that if I wasn't actively focusing on a job or project, something to do and help, I was stuck reminiscing. Images and memories constantly popped up, causing my heart to hitch and my eyes to water. Everybody I had known, my friends, my pets, they were all gone. Linda quickly caught my mood. She looked up at me from where she leaned against me. She was so tiny, so fragile, yet she contained so much strength. She bolstered me, helped me move forward. Yes, everything I had known and loved was gone in this new, horrifying world. But there were people left that I could help and care for. Being caught in nostalgia and misery over the past would help nobody. I took a deep breath and quietly asked Linda to let me up. She obliged, and I stood to get ready. Larry was soon at my side, and we were ready to get back to expanding our living area. Then Jessie walked up.
"We need more supplies. We don't have everything up here. Walk with me, gentlemen."
She strode beyond us imperiously. The doors of the airlock were held open now, so we walked beyond them to the newly opened area. Then she led us into her office and closed the door. I was a little confused because Jessie was rarely about secrecy and clearly treasured transparency.
"Here's the long and short of it," she started. "We need more stuff from the store at ground level. Our crew are not going to be satisfied with living in the server room while we wait for rescue."
"Wait, we're going to be rescued?"
I interjected. She looked at me with clear annoyance.
"Yes, our office is supposed to be a sort of lookout. However, the storms have knocked out our communications. In that event, someone is supposed to come for us. I just don't know how long it will be. Could be today, could be a month from now. So we need things to make us all more comfortable. I've drawn up some ideas for supplies. Pillows, tents, clothes, jackets, more food, stuff we can actually use."
I nodded.
"Why aren't they coming sooner? And I know this isn't actually related, but how is the bathroom warm? And how are the toilets still working?"
"Didn't I tell you that earlier?" Maybe not. Water is heavily insulated as it comes up the main trunk. We get water and power from the bunker under the building. There's registers that recycle the air in the bathroom and server room. It's part of the space we lost to the storage room, like central air. We have to wait for them to come to us since we don't have any vehicles to get out of the base we're attached to."
What bunker? What base? And we do have vehicles,
I said. I was growing more confused. A lot of what was going on didn't make a ton of sense.
What? No, I told you about
she said. She started getting quieter as she spoke, trailing the last few words off. She was recalling everything she had said up to that point.
No, I didn't. Okay, so there's a bunker under the building. It has a small crew that works on whatever it is that provides power to us up here. We're supposed to maintain the communications and provide an actual lookout over the city. It has massive water reserves and some sort of treatment plants. As for the base, I'm not sure exactly where it is. I wasn't briefed on that. And no, we don't have vehicles that can handle this cold. We don't have anything that can handle that violence either.
She pointed out the window at the debris flying past.
And you just forgot all of this until now?
I questioned her. Jessie gave me the stink eye.
I didn't forget about it, asshole. We were trying not to fucking die from exposure inside one of the bigger cities in America. It was kind of a doomsday situation, okay?
I felt properly chastised from her remarks.
Fine. Why didn't we just stay inside the bathrooms?
Because that tile is going to freeze, and the tile inside the server room won't. The server room is easier to heat, and there's more room. There's also controls for everything in the server room that aren't present in the bathrooms. We're lucky those even work.
All right, I guess that makes sense. What's next?
She sat in thought for a moment.
I want you to lead a party down to the store on the ground floor. It's a seriously long climb under any circumstances, but this is far from ideal. Then, not only do you have to grab supplies, but you have to climb back up.
She paused for a moment.
It's worse than that, though. We have plenty of MREs, but no other foods. We don't have enough water, and if we're going to cook, we need another source of heat. Propane stoves or something. The supplies were more for short-term habitability, and we didn't think it would get this cold, especially this fast.
Why are we still here? Why not get to the bunker?
That's dangerous, and we only have supplies for us. I don't know that they could support us or that we could even access it. I have a key card, but without elevators and cold gear, people will die.
So we have to make do here until we get rescued?
Yes. For that reason, I want to send a few people initially to determine how safe it is to even go to the store. We have no idea what's out there. Hell, we know next to nothing about what caused this event in the first place.
Jess, chill. I'll sort out a party. We'll keep an eye out for people and supplies. I'll take Larry since he already knows what's up.
Larry nodded in agreement.
I'll ask Brandon and a few others.
Great. Figure out 6 people, then gather supplies. You can take anything you think you'll need from the supply room, but remember that you've got to carry whatever you take down 700 feet. And be safe.
I nodded, then turned to Larry.
Shall we?